You're listening to the Autism Weekly podcast. Each week we share community voices and bring light to stories that increase awareness, acceptance, equity, access, and inclusion. If you haven't already, subscribe to join the Autism Weekly family. I'm your host, Jeff Skibitsky. This week, we're joined by David Geslak, also known as Coach Dave, a pioneer in using exercise to support individuals with autism. He's the founder of a fitness program taught in 9 universities and has partnered with the American College of Sports Medicine to create the Autism Exercise Specialist Certificate. David has dedicated his career to empowering the autism community through movement. Today, we'll discuss how exercise supports development, share strategies for daily routines, and highlight the global impact of his work. Welcome to the podcast, David Geslak.
Mr. Jeff, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And you're returning to us, which is wonderful, because this is something that I think a refresher is so needed, just because for families, for individuals that identify autistic, for professionals, this is all information that we need to know so that we can incorporate it appropriately. There's a lot of well-intended individuals out there that are trying to, create opportunities for exercise and fitness, but having guidance, I think, makes it more personalized, makes it more appropriate to that particular individual. And I think that you're going to guide us on this. But before we go there, I want you to be able to share your backstory again, because I think that it's important to know what drove you into both the autistic community and the field of exercise and fitness.
Yep. No, happy to do so, and I'll try to keep it brief. But 21 years ago, in 2004, I was training a father. I had a gym that was meant for youth fitness. However, just to keep the doors open, I had to train athletes and adults. And one of the fathers I was training brought me his son on the autism spectrum, and he said, "Can you teach him sports, but he can't skip?"
Mm-hmm.
I knew nothing about autism, did not learn it in my undergrad. I have a degree in health promotion from the University of Iowa. But I did learn about the importance of skipping on the neurotypical population, which is if a neurotypical child can skip, they have better, or their reading has improved. So when I heard that, I said, okay, I want to try to get him to skip. And also when I was at Iowa, my senior year, I was a student assistant strength and conditioning coach for their football program. And my role there was to reteach Olympic lifts, like the squat, the power clean, even the bench press, because those athletes, high school athletes, right, it's typically about quantity, not quality. So the way that I was taught was to break it down. So I used that same approach to get this boy to skip, and I was able to do so in 4 sessions.
Oh, wow.
Mom was crying. Dad was wide-eyed. The boys, Joseph, his smile was ear to ear. And that was my first connection. I went on to continue to work with him and then others for about 3 years privately and in small groups. But then I started to see through that time, the diversity of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I began to work with them and seeing results, but also there was a lot I didn't know. So I actually left my gym and then went to go work at a school for children with autism. One of the oldest therapeutic day schools in Illinois. It's called Giant Steps. But I went there as to be a paraeducator.
Mm-hmm.
So that is where I got my training. I mean, really more of a master's degree, if you think about it, in autism. I was working with high school age students, changing diapers on them. But more importantly, seeing all these kids and in speech, OT, social skills groups, getting them off the bus, seeing their day. And after about a year of doing that, the school said, can you start our fitness program? So I did. Did that for 3 years, created a program that worked, but then really knew that there was, I think, a bigger opportunity to educate professionals and help more families. And that's why I started Exercise Connection. And to sum it up, I've now been to 9 countries, training parents and professionals, working with the American College of Sports Medicine. We've come a long way, but there's still a long way to go.
Yeah, well, I mean, just going back and just hearing your journey is that there are so many folks that are behavior technicians and paraeducators out there, and it's inspiring to know that, hey, you know what? I started in this position. It kind of pushed me into a passion, and then that passion led me to the innovation or the creativity to now create this particular field or to really drive into specializing to help support individuals. You hit on something, though, that I'd love to, I guess, educate myself a little bit more on. But you mentioned that the physical exercise, something like skipping, was almost like a neurological exercise at the same time. It's starting to build some of those connections and being able to kind of help with whether it's cognition or whether it's reading. Is this a common occurrence with a lot of exercise and movement?
Well, specifically for those with autism and related disabilities, the benefits of exercise extend beyond the health related. So that is, there's academic improvement, there's behavioral improvement, there is on-task behaviors improved, social skills improve, even language development. I think that's the big thing that I know we advocate to educate for parents or other professionals outside of the physical or the exercise industry, but even special education professionals, right? Like, ironically, this is what schools are trying to do to help these kids in a classroom is get their bodies more regulated and calm, right? Have them be more attentive to whatever tasks they're teaching. But across the country, exercise is not a primary intervention used. It doesn't get a lot of respect in the schools when all the research is there to support them. So it's sad, but these are the things that we still try to educate families on and say, look, you have a voice here, and by no matter what, by whatever happens, what's happening politically right now, currently, it's a mandated by IDEA law that kids with disabilities should get physical education. But the schools aren't going to tell them that. And I've been in those IEP meetings, but the parents, they need to know, because if they start saying it, things are going to start to happen.
Absolutely. And I mean, you mentioned the word sad, but it's absolutely disappointing that some of these things that we know through research and that we know have an inherent benefit for so many parts of life are, I guess, receiving so little resource to make it happen. And they're trying to do it on a shoestring budget. They're not empowering people to have the knowledge, to have all of the abilities to be able to tailor programs. On that note, you built and you kind of developed and created the Autism Exercise Specialist Certificate. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, because I think that you mentioned there are well-meaning individuals that are trying to do exercise programs, but we all know that if you're not doing things correctly, is that there might be some byproducts of that aren't going to be helpful in the long term for each of the students, each of the recipients of the care. Tell me about this certificate that you've created.
Well, so it first launched in 2018. But if many people may not realize, but the American College of Sports Medicine is the world's largest exercise science organization and the gold standard in fitness. And so that I am an ACSM exercise physiologist. And so this is where I went, essentially went to school for and learned. But when I first obviously spent time working with those with autism and seeing the gap or the education gap, not just, for fitness professionals, again, I wanted more fitness professionals to be educated so they weren't turned away, because this still happens today where the kids or the families are being turned away in the gyms because, again, they don't know, right? And
Mhm.
it's not that many of them don't know what to do. It's not that they don't want to help, but they're worried about a liability. They don't know what to do. And of course, they don't want to harm the child or do something, etc., or do something wrong. But as I spent, as I mentioned, right, the time in the schools and then time presenting to physical educators at various conferences across the country, I said to ACSM, I said, look, there's an opportunity here beyond the fitness professionals because, again, going back to physical education, only 14 states require an advanced certificate to be deemed adapted certified. So
Mhm.
most of these kids, or most of these, students coming out don't know what to do, right? They're not going to get all the information they need in a 3-hour credit course. And it's not their fault. There's a systemic problem within the higher education system to educate students on this.
Mhm.
So ACSM allowed PE teachers, OTs, PTs, SLPs, behavioral therapists, all to earn this because the importance of exercise is so powerful for these kids and adults. So we now it was relaunched in last year in August. It's a fully asynchronous course now, 14 hours self-paced online, case-based learning. You see videos of individuals across the spectrum, and you're learning exercises, routines, whether it's in a clinic, a school, or a home.
Yeah, and I mean it must build trust. I mean, if I, as a parent, if I know that somebody has been given the appropriate training and education, for me, as an
Mhm.
educator, I'm going to buy into it more because I know that this person knows how to be able to really empower my child, and that means a lot. So when you're kind of going through your journey as far as being able to start and develop your own program, now you're helping to be able to train others, and you're creating the certificate that has built out a true profession around this that is certified. What are some of the observations that you've seen that the gap in knowledge has improved, where we're actually able to really help support autistic individuals better through better informing?
So I think one of the biggest, I forgot the word you used, but validation of this and what it's done. I think there's a research study supporting the certificate, independent research study, and it was about the use of evidence-based strategies.
Hmm.
And more practitioners had better self-efficacy, and I think something else, I should know it, but it was ultimately revolved around evidence-based practice. And that's what I learned as a paraeducator, right? I was seeing all these evidence-based practices used in a variety of situations, or situations, scenarios, classrooms, but still to this day, commonly, not in every, but in many, let's just say physical education environments, it's a blank canvas.
Hmm.
So educators say, well, they're not doing anything. And I say, do you have pictures? Are you using evidence? No, try that. And then guess what? Then they're like, oh, I showed them a picture and they started to attempt the exercise. Yeah, take your voice out of it. Let's try a photo. And it works.
Hmm.
Um, so I think that's the biggest thing is foundational practice. And not only does it apply to those with autism, right? A picture, it applies to a neurotypical child or student or client, and it can work with any individual. And that's the thing that we're trying to teach is start there, right?
Hmm.
There is no miracle exercise program or formula that I could provide because as we know, right? I'm sure you've said it on your podcast here, right? If you met one child with autism, you've met one child with autism. But it's how do they learn best? And then how are we going to apply exercise in the strategies or the protocols that help them learn?
Absolutely. And then for autistic individuals, when you're trying to kind of identify some of the core areas that improvements are occurring, You mentioned that it occurs in reading. I would imagine that it helps with self-regulation. And one of the things that immediately comes to mind for me is the social impact, is that children engage oftentimes their social relationships around physical play, around being able to engage that way. So what are some of the biggest impacts you feel like running an appropriate exercise program really does for children? And do you have any stories of some of the impact or individual kind of successes that you've seen out there?
I mean, it's a lot to answer there, but yes, I can answer a lot of that. So I think the biggest impact and what is not measurable, and maybe there is a researcher or scientist that can measure it, but is that confidence building, right? That's not only what I've seen, what we hear from others, right? Is that they're more confident. You see a smile, you see an engagement, and I think that speaks of volumes. And you hear that from families, right? So we've seen and heard those stories across the world.
Mm-hmm.
I think what, again, some specific stories. I mean, the skipping story was one, right? But God, there is so many. I think going back to working with the school district, and there was a pretty challenge. He would be defined as like level 3 autistic, and they're like, he's not gonna do this. And I saw the child because I observed, and I was working with their teams. And for example, he was like, a runner, a eloper, would lick his hands and wouldn't sit still. And I kind of bit my tongue to the paraeducators. I said, they went through this all day training. I'm like, just focus on what I told you, show
Mm-hmm.
some pictures, etc. I went back like 3 weeks later, and they pulled me aside. They're like, hey, he did it. I said, he did what? They're like, he got down on the ground and he was there and he attempted to do the exercise. I go, what did you do? We put a picture down. That's it.
Yep.
Right. It, I, what I like to remind professionals and parents is it's teaching exercise is 75% understanding autism, 25% understanding exercise.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to an exercise professional and they start, and I tell this to exercise professionals, if you start spitting out anatomy and all these synapses and all these big words, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to the families, and for this population, it doesn't matter, especially to those kids. What it matters is that you can draw a connection with them and you understand how they learn. Once you do that, that's when things are going to happen for that
Yeah.
child, that family.
Yeah, and it's the how do you learn, but it's also the motivation to why, is that we all have different reasons that we're going to engage in exercise, and knowing what is important for an individual is it's going to get that dedication. It's going to get them wanting to engage. It's going to get the motivation to continue it outside of a training session. So when you're talking about some of the roles that community plays and that schools play, and just in exercise in general, I think about how many barriers that it could break down. Is that if I'm able to teach somebody to engage in some physical activity, I've now opened up another avenue for them to be able to be included and to be successful in community activities, to be able to be a part of maybe sports teams or things like that. Do you see that right now you have this program, you're building out, you're helping to educate, but does it need to expand beyond the consultation? Do we need to be able to reach more people, more environments, and make this more inclusive?
I think I follow what you're asking. I mean, I think there's no question there needs to be improvement in many different settings, physical activity settings for this population. And I think it's, again, people, depending, if it's not the per se practitioner, but it's the manager, if they don't understand, right, they're afraid of what they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, there has to be a better push towards inclusion, but I also say if you're not educated and but you have well intentions to get this population included, but you don't have the team or the education to do so. You may get them in the door and you may have a session with them, but if it's exercise related or anything, but exercise specifically, if you do something wrong, they're probably not going to come back.
Mm-hmm.
Or if the parents know that you don't know what you're doing, the parents aren't going to bring them back. So yeah, there still needs a lot of improvement in some areas, but I do want to mention something because I think it's important for families and even professionals to know about sports. There is nothing wrong with sports. Let me start there. But when we think about team sports for this population, I would say those are not autism friendly for a majority of them. Why? Because it involves communication, social skills, it's unstructured, it involves typically a lot of advanced gross motor or motor planning. That is all the challenges that those with autism commonly have. So many parents are well, let's put them in sports. Maybe for some.
Mm-hmm.
But when you think of exercise, right? Working one-to-one with the trainer and maybe slowly progressing on exercise. Think about that for an autistic individual. They've gone through ABA or behavioral therapy with a one-to-one with someone. They've gone to speech and OT one-to-one commonly with someone, right? So that environment right there is more set up for success than a field, a gymnasium that's the most unsensory friendly environment in the entire school. So I think parents really need to understand, and people need to understand, like, yeah, we need to look at these types of environments first to get them physically active for their health, and then all the other types of benefits that come with it.
Yeah. And it's almost like triaging and going through, hey, at first I got to get the skill building, and then I can start generalizing. With that generalizing component, I definitely hear what you're saying about just saying, hey, let's just sign this child up for a team. But I've seen some of those middle gaps, like the Miracle League sports. I've seen things like that. And my mind immediately goes to, you have these certified trainers, you have these folks that understand how to be able to empower the autistic individual that might need a little bit more tailored focus. Is the consultation going to be good for that coach of the Miracle League team? Is that consultation that your group might be able to provide on being able to say, hey, you know what, we need to make sure what I'm working on in the gym carries over in a social environment. This is what you need to be doing. Should we be having more coordination of care that way?
Yeah, and I think when you mean consultation, are you also saying like at the certificate or what are you?
You know what? I think a little bit of both. I think it's the collaboration piece of making sure that trainers that are certified have a venue to be able to work directly with some of these community-based programs as well, to say, hey, this is how you do it.
Yeah, no, 100. Yeah, I follow you 100%. Like, again, you have a well-intended, or just say a professional working on the coaching team, but do they have opportunity to learn and gain knowledge? 100%. And the one thing that we talk about in our certificate course too, to trainers or other professionals, like, look, ask the families, right? Ask them what has been working in the OT, the behavioral therapy session, because don't reinvent the wheel, especially if you're bringing them into an exercise session, because then it's only going to cause them more cognitive confusion to then implement a new, or to understand a new strategy that maybe, oh, well, Coach Dave said, let's do that because he said that in slide 25 in the certificate. I also said on slide 26, ask the families what works and then use that strategy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're the most informed on how their child navigates the world around them. And if you're not using that resource, you're going to fail 90% of the time. But you've also learned, because you do your work globally, so you've learned to engage directly with a family and to understand what's their priority. How does their culture affect the service, and how does that affect what you're going to be working on? Do you mind sharing with us a little bit about your global experience and what that's kind of informed you on being able to work with autistic individuals and exercise?
So globally, what I'm like, I was just recently in Abu Dhabi. I've done a lot of work in the Middle East, um, but globally, I feel like they're obviously years behind where we are, many of these countries. But I think they're open, not that to say we aren't, but they're open to any type of strategy, evidence based that can help.
Mm-hmm.
I think, like, specifically, I think I just said this. I was in Abu Dhabi, and culturally, yeah, things are different, right? And what I learned there also was, while our research is important, right, to start getting them to understand, not necessarily understand, maybe that's not the right word, but they look at our research, exercise or anything, and while it's critical and it drives their innovation and their research, it doesn't mean much because it's not done in their people and their culture, which was,
Mm-hmm.
that's not where my head's at, but I'm hearing these things and it makes sense. But exercise, especially in, in the Middle East and some of those countries, like with, I'm very literally hands on, right? So even when I was in Egypt for the first time and I was trying to prompt the instructor, who was a female, right,
Mm-hmm.
to show her how to prompt a kid, it was hard because I want to touch and I'm not supposed to. But
Mm-hmm.
think about that too. Then let's take it the other way. There's some kids with autism that will not let you touch them.
Yeah.
So we have to, as instructors, we have to figure out, well, how am I going to prompt this kid to do this when I can't physically prompt him or her?
Mm-hmm.
So it's been an interesting experience overseas. I think, again, I feel that sometimes overseas they're more open to collaboration that I've seen here in the US in regards to different disciplines working together on the same objective, but sometimes professionals think, well, it's their way or the only way, and
Yeah.
that's also a problem. I think
Mm-hmm.
there I think it's a little bit more open that I've seen over the years.
Is that flexibility of thought, whether it's culturally or whether it's just the fact that every autistic individual is an individual, is that flexibility in programming, flexibility in thought, is that taught during the certification process as far as, hey, this is how you have to adapt to an individual's needs?
Yes, throughout. Because, and like I said it earlier, yeah, there is no one size fits all approach. I wish there was,
Mm-hmm.
because that's the question we always get, well, what should I do for my kid? Or, I wish I knew. I wish I could
Yeah.
give it to you, but I can't. But you said it earlier too, right? It's about finding that reinforcement, that motivator. That's probably second to, okay, how do they learn best? What's going to motivate them, mom or dad? Tell me. And
Mm-hmm.
then we got to take that to start the structure of my program. I'm not worried about sets and reps yet. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
worried about structure, and then me as the instructor building the relationship with that child or that client. And then I'm going to get to the exercise. Because if
Absolutely.
you try to push the exercise first, you're probably going to lose them.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, your description of everything that's going on right there, my mind immediately goes to the fact that yes, this certification is going to be great for trainers. But I
Mhm.
also think there's got to be a venue that this certification is something that should be looked at by potentially behavior analysts. It should be looked at by special educators. It should be looked at by a variety of different people, because if you can help somebody to be able to incorporate some of these behavioral principles that you've been describing
Yep.
and exercise at the same time, you're now creating more holistic treatment. Is that part of the group that you're saying, hey, you know what? You need to be reaching out. You need to be looking at this as a possible add-on to your certification and knowledge set.
Yeah. I mean, well, we have universities not only using the certificate, but exercise buddy and our resources, our visual system. But like one university, it's a small university outside of Chicago. It's called Aurora University. It's actually a university course now, open to therapeutic rec, exercise science, physical education, and I think it's psychology.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's what that's it. it needs exercise as a piece, and even in those special education classrooms, because we were just on a call earlier today, and with another university in Indiana, and they're like, the special education professors like, yeah, I tell my students, you got to be prepared because you may have to teach some sort of exercise or something, and that's what's happening in the education system. So exercise plays a critical role in all environments, and I think, yeah, and I'm very blessed to say we're hitting those groups and organizations, but like I said, there's a lot more that need that education and help, and that's what we're trying to do.
I said I'd love to give you a platform right now on helping to, I guess, educate, but I mean, we see easily that benefit within a school structure of making sure that the physical education teachers and that everybody really understands how to be able to appropriately provide exercise and how to be able to adapt that appropriately. And the certification makes almost immediate sense in that environment. But I would imagine is that gyms that maybe they can't immediately see the financial impact and it's stopping them, or they have other barriers. What would you be telling those individuals? Because by not getting this certification, they're probably limiting the number of people coming into their gym. They're probably creating a almost inherent barrier of access to exercise. So what would you be telling them about their investment in a certification like this?
I mean, it's going to expand their knowledge beyond autism. That's first, because some people get myopic and they're like, well, it just works with autism. Well, you and I both know the strategies that can help an autistic individual, like I said, I think I said that earlier, can help someone who has ADD, ADHD, or is neurotypical.
Yeah.
So and we've had trainers tell us, oh, like specifically, they've said, oh, this can actually work with my senior citizen clients. I'm like, color coded, it's structure, right? It's broken down. Okay. So I think that's where they first need to think, okay, this is beyond autism. It's going to help your trainer be a better trainer for a variety of populations. But when you think about the financial piece of it, well, one, if they get into it just for the financial, parents will sift through that. So then don't even bother, right? But from a financial side of things, I've had the same client for 10 plus years. Also a routine client because he wants to come every Wednesday at 3:00. A trainer would love to have a consistent clientele every day, right? And then for the business owner who's funding that and doing it, you maybe there's adults with autism who aren't working, unfortunately, or who have in a day program and they're coming in your off hours.
Yeah.
Okay, there's some more revenue generated for you, right? So yeah, there is a business model here, and there's gyms popping up. When I started back in 2004, there was only a few that at the time on the online that we could find, right? But now, they're popping up everywhere because of the rise, right? And the need. So yeah.
It makes a lot of sense what you're saying. And I mean, it probably is a passion-driven field. You're wanting to do it because you want to empower people. And if folks can get over the fact that financial hurdle is not a hurdle, but it actually could open up their client, their access to different client sets, their ability to be able to specialize, their more consistent clients coming through. I think those are things that would kind of take away that last barrier of saying, go do it, make it a part of my treatment and live up to what I would love to do on a community service side.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is, and there's no like per se studies that I can validate this, but I've heard if you get that kid signed up and you made a connection, well, guess what? Mom or dad may then end up signing up too. Now, whether it's a membership, not necessarily personal training, but again, if you've shown to the family you're invested in their kid, that you want to help them, and more importantly, you are helping them, sure, you may get more clientele from that of the neurotypical population. That's not a guarantee, but the point is, yeah, you're not excluding it. It's 81% of those with disabilities feel unwelcome walking into a fitness center.
Yeah. And I think having diversity in clientele and just even, I will say personally, working with children who identify autistic, adults who identify autistic, neurodiverse populations in general, it's rewarding. It helps me to understand a little bit more outside of my own shoes and creates new skill sets for me as far as perspective taking, as far as adaptability, as far as being able to be innovative, listening and being part of that. So there's some skills that are going to come across just by being able to broaden your skill set of who your clients are. So you've done such a good job of growing a field. You've really worked hard on being able to help people to understand the benefits of exercise and why having a special certificate is going to be able to empower you as a teacher, as a clinician, as as a fitness trainer. What's next for you on your mission to promote exercise as a tool for autism support?
Yeah, what's next? I mean, like I said, there's a lot that still need help, or I shouldn't say help, but there's a lot of that we still have opportunity to impact. And I think globally, while we're trying here in the States, I think there's some opportunities overseas that I'm hopeful for. Specifically in the United Arab Emirates. If you don't know, they define people with autism or people with disabilities as people of determination.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had some interesting opportunities there, and we have some small little pilots going. But I think there's an opportunity to have a real, almost like a clean slate of research and exercise and just doing it all. So I'm hopeful that something like that can come into play. But at the end of the day, it's just educating more professionals about the resources that we have and trying to find other ways, creative ways that they can be able to purchase and get these products so they can help their kids and their students or their clients.
Yeah, I mean, and that's wonderful. I think exercise is a human benefit. I think each one of us could say is that when we are engaged in exercise, when we have that routine, when we're eating healthy, when we have kind of the idea that fitness has to be incorporated into our lives,
yeah,
is that our lives improve. We're thinking more clearly, we're happier, we have better relationships. There's so many byproducts to that. So being able to extend that privilege, that benefit across different populations and the autistic population in general, I think that's something we should be doing. And I think it's a wonderful thing to be able to kind of focus around. So what's the one takeaway that you'd love for people who hopped onto the podcast today? Maybe exercise wasn't on the forefront of their mind. Maybe it was. What would you be telling them that you hope they walk away with?
So the biggest thing that I want people to understand, and we make it a part of every presentation, is essentially the starting point, the amount of exercise, whether you're trying with your child, with a client, or with the student right in the classroom, etc. Is research shows that 10 to 15 minutes of low to moderate intense exercise has benefits for those with autism. Because what we've heard over the years, right, and this happened to me, I just got done with a session with a child. His mom came to pick him up, and she looked at me, and I was excited to tell her about the session, and she goes, "What did I just pay for?" And I was taken aback. And I said, what do you mean? And she goes, "He's not sweating." And that makes sense because the way that the media, that the show The Biggest Loser and all these weight loss shows, they have to be drenched in sweat to see results.
Mm-hmm.
That's the case for this population, and quite frankly, that's not the case for the neurotypical population. There is a problem out there in the health promotion of what we do for our kids with autism and quite frankly for the neurotypical population, of why they're not meeting physical activity guidelines. And I think, again, I want people to know 10 to 15 minutes is shown to have benefits, and those benefits are are improvements in behavior, which again, what the schools are trying to do, what therapists are trying to do in their sessions. If you can spend 10 minutes and then have them go sit at a chair to get that fine motor done or to do some task, and now they're not hand flapping or echolalia or rocking, which again, we're not trying to stop those behaviors, but if you're being proactive and those behaviors happen to stop, now the practitioner can go teach and do what they need to do, and the kid's more on task. That's what the power of exercise can do for your kids.
And that's a great message for us all to walk away with. And Coach Dave, I appreciate your time coming on again today to help inform us and to give us, I think, the push to start looking at some of these options that are out there to better inform and to give us more skills to be able to help empower. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks again.
Thank you for listening to Autism Weekly. We hope you tune back in next week to learn more about autism in the real world. Autism Weekly is now found on all the major listening apps, including Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon Music, and more. Subscribe to be notified when we post a new podcast. Autism Weekly is produced by ABS Kids. ABS Kids is proud to provide diagnostic assessments and ABA therapy to children with developmental delays like autism spectrum disorder. You can learn more about ABS Kids and the Autism Weekly podcast by visiting abskids.com. Thanks for tuning in. See you again next week.